Hey, what's up everybody? It's Lids, and we're back for some more Gwent, and today we're playing more of the Double Down seasonal event, which is an alternate game mode in which at the start of the match, every card in our starting deck gets duplicated. Then whenever we play a unit, if we have a unit with the same provision cost, we will also play that from our deck. Today we are doing 3 decks in one video, and we have some absolutely insane combos that I can't wait to show you. So let's go give them a look. Alright, so you may remember at the end of our previous Nilfgaard video for this event how I had said there are a bunch of other Nilfgaard deck ideas that I had, and so for today we are squeezing 3 decks into one video. Let's start with our Enslave deck, and this is Enslave 7, because we are loading in as many tactics as we can fit in this deck, and because in this event, every card in our starting deck gets duplicated, that means we just have an absolutely absurd number of cards in our deck, and there are a few reasons for that. Of course, it makes for a strong leader ability, but it also makes for 1 or 2 other very good combos. So we will, if we can, try to use Ffion to set ourselves up with our highest provision cost cards at the top of our deck, so in round 2, in round 3, we draw into the good stuff and don't have to worry about drawing into the low value 4 provision tactics that are filling out the bottom of our deck. But we will start by using Glynnis, which is the most powerful assimilate engine in the game. And you might be asking yourself, well, Lids, why do you have an assimilate engine in a tactics deck? Well. It is because since we have so many tactics, the newly reworked Stefan Skellen with 16 tactics in our deck gives 5 copies of Ace up the sleeve. So all of those trigger assimilate. And because Stefan Skellen is our only 11 provision unit, when we play Stefan, we get both copies of him and get 10 copies of Ace up the sleeve, which is a huge burst of damage. And if you have Glynnis on the board when you do that, that is 20 points worth of assimilate procs in 1 turn. Per Glynnis. So that's just ridiculous tempo. So it's also just hilarious and I love it. So that's one of the key combos. And then the other key combo is that we also have Kolgrim, who, because we have way more cards in our deck than our opponent will have, will get a huge boost once we're dropped down to Adrenaline 1. Now, generally what you want to do with a Kolgrim deck is in round 1, you actually don't play Kolgrim. Instead, what we'll do is we will focus on that Glynnis plus Stefan combo to give Glynnis a lot of boosts and have Stefan give us a whole bunch of damage. And then we will use many of our tactics to probably not have a lot of tempo in round 1 outside of that huge combo. And so our hope is actually that our opponent realizes this, passes early when they start playing big cards and we can't pass them all that easily. And then what we do is we deliberately go a bunch of cards down just by spamming all of our tactics. And sure, they may not be as valuable as playing a unit because units you play 2 of per turn in this event, whereas tactics you're still only playing 1. But eventually, by playing almost every single card in our hand, actually every single card in our hand if we can afford to do so, we do that in round 1 and eventually take the win. And if we've already taken the win and still have cards to spare, still do it. Still go as many cards down as you can go, so that in round 2, that's where you break out Kolgrim or ideally Ffion to protect Kolgrim. So that way, you can immediately trigger that Adrenaline 1, because that's why you want to blow through as many cards as possible in round 1. So this is active for as long as possible. You pass early in the round, or at least you run out of cards early in round 2. And while you don't have anything to play, Kolgrim will remain getting that boost every turn because his Adrenaline 1 is still active even after you pass. Your opponent will continue to play cards, but they're going to struggle to catch him unless they have something that can break through your defender or reset Kolgrim. And that's the gist of it. We also can use something like Assire, where if we have already used Kolgrim or already used Glynnis or Stefan and we want to get them back, then we can use Assire to bring them from our graveyard back into our deck. Obviously, we have a bunch of cards in our deck, so it's going to be kind of difficult to get them out from there unless you use Oneiromancy to tutor them. But assuming that you get Ffion so that you have all the best cards in your hand, then that should still be feasible. So again, that's the whole strategy to the deck. Round 1, you can use Glynnis plus Stefan, which is huge tempo with that play. But once you've done that, you don't have much high value, high point cards remaining for round 1. Besides, I mean, Ffion, I guess to a certain extent. But your opponent hopefully passes early, assuming that they have a big lead and they think it's going to take you a whole bunch of cards to catch them, and it will, but that's actually what you want to do. Go as many cards down as you have to go in order to win round 1 and keep on playing. Just don't play Kolgrim and don't play Ffion if you have them in hand. And then that means that you win round 1, go a bunch of cards down to do it. Round 2, break out Kolgrim and ideally protect him with Ffion and make it really hard for your opponent to catch you. And if they do somehow manage to do that, then you bring back Kolgrim or maybe even Stefan in a short round 3 and use that to get a whole bunch of tempo. So that is the idea for that deck. Then we also have a really fun deck that is built around using as many copies as possible of the Imperial Practitioner to create as many copies as possible of a very specific card at the top of our deck so that we can spam it like crazy and get absolutely absurd tempo and points. It's ridiculous. And that card is the Eternal Eclipse, the new scenario for Nilfgaard, because if we trigger Chapter 1 and we have a bunch of copies of Eternal Eclipse when we do this, that means that every cultist in our deck is getting multiple of that infusion, where they're not just getting boosted by 1 every time you play a cultist, but they're getting boosted by 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's where it starts. And then it also scales more quickly every time you play a bronze cultist, so this just absolutely takes off exponentially if you can get a bunch of Eternal Eclipses in your deck. So how do you make that happen? You do it by, as I said, creating as many copies of the Imperial Practitioner as you can. And so we have a bunch of ways to spawn him. Some of those being with Idarran, or at least when you're doing the spawning, Idarran will create extra copies of him. And then Artorious Vigo is guaranteed to get the Imperial Practitioner as an option there. So that's another way to make it happen. You can use Operator to spawn in one on your opponent's side and on your side. That's an option too. And we also have Megascope, which can also spawn in more of those practitioners as well. And so you're just trying to get as many of them as you can possibly get on the board. Once you've done so, you use Vilgefortz Renegade to swap in one of the cards from your hand into your opponent's graveyard. And in doing so, you control what the Imperial Practitioner will create copies of at the top of your deck. Now, technically, there's a little bit of a tricky aspect to this, but it is very controllable. First of all, your opponent needs to have a card in their graveyard, so either wait until they play a special, which with all the Neros in this event is probably not that unlikely for them to do, or deal some damage, and then you can do it. But anyways, because Vilgefortz Renegade is our only 13 provision cost unit, when we play Vilgefortz Renegade the first time from our hand, we will also get the second one from our deck as well. What that means is that the first time you use the initial Vilgefortz Renegade deploy ability, you actually do not want to put the Eternal Eclipse in your opponent's graveyard. Put whatever you want in there. Put your weakest card in your opponent's graveyard and take whatever you want from them. The second Vilgefortz Renegade that you get out from your deck, that is the one that you need to use to put the Eternal Eclipse scenario into your opponent's graveyard, because that is going to be the most recent card to go into your opponent's graveyard. So once you've done that, then you can click on all the order abilities for all of your Imperial Practitioners, and that means that you're going to have a whole bunch of copies of that scenario at the top of your deck that you'll draw into for the next round, or you can use your leader ability to draw into them as well. You could use Snowdrop to draw into some of them. You can use Doadrick to draw into some of them. And so you get all of them on the board, and then you throw down one of your Cultists, Prophet, Master of Ceremonies, or if you use an Eternal Eclipse Deacon, you can of course make another card in your hand, a Gold Cultist, or the Master of Ceremonies will also just turn one of your golds into a cultist. So just make sure that you have at least one of them to trigger. That's first round of the scenario, and in doing so, again, this stacks the infusions on all of your existing cultists, which is just crazy how quickly the boosts on this add up. And that is the idea for this deck. Once you have done that, you're, of course, round 2, you're playing all the scenarios, you're triggering all the scenarios, and that alone is probably enough for you to win in round 2, and then in round 3, you'll probably draw into still more of your scenarios. Just make sure that you have at least some cultists remaining to play so that you can benefit from those huge infusions. Then for our last deck, it's actually kind of similar to what we were just looking at. It is also a deck that has the Eternal Eclipse, but it's also a deck that has Masquerade Ball. So this is going to be a double scenario deck, and one that is focusing on applying as many statuses to our opponent as possible. So obviously, we have the Eternal Eclipse, which is cultist-centric, as we were just talking about. So we know how this works. It is, of course, a status to infuse our opponents with this ability from the Eternal Eclipse Initiate. So that does generally work well with the Masquerade Ball and Thirsty Dames that we're going to get from that Masquerade Ball. So there are some good combinations there. So generally what we like to do is play Eternal Eclipse in round 1. Ideally get both copies of that, which we could do with Avallac'h Sage, or just draw into them, or use leader ability to make that happen, or again, Snowdrop plus Doadrick can help make it happen. So you do that because if you get the infusion, that is in a way a sort of carryover, because any cultists that have that infusion will gain power from every subsequent cultist that you play, and that is something that can still happen in round 2 and round 3, so why not get that started in round 1 and have this be your round 1 win condition? And if you can, use the Deacon to make more cultists in your hand, in your deck, then that much better. Then we also have Tibor, who is helpful with his new rework because he now gives our opponents an infused status, which can help them take more damage, and because we would like to trigger the death blow from the initiates, that is an infusion in and of itself, but when it activates here, let's take a closer look at it. When we trigger the Death Wish on the card that gets infused by the Initiate, that card gets destroyed, and we create a copy of it on our side. So if we can get more statuses on our opponents, more infusions that help them take damage when they receive statuses, like from the Initiate, then that's a synergy there. And of course, we have the other gold cultists that we saw in our starting deck for the previous deck. Then shifting gears to Masquerade Ball. Of course, in this case, we want to play aristocrats, and those aristocrats could be also cultists if we give them the infusions from the Eternal Eclipse Deacon. So again, that's how we can get some overlap between what cards work for one scenario and the cards that work for another scenario. And they are both status-centric because in this case, we are spawning in the Thirsty Dame. And once we get that, that is another card that works well with Tibor because he's going to give a status to our opponents every turn. And we also have Emir, who will give Spying to every card that our opponent plays. So that's another status, and he is an aristocrat, so he will trigger Masquerade Ball. And now he has been reworked such that he will play a card from our hand on the same turn that we play him, and that means we can use him to maybe even get another Thirsty Dame on the board. And, well, that means just even faster tempo and even more cards that benefit from all those statuses. And on top of that, we have Philippe, another great way to apply a bunch of statuses. And then we also have the newly reworked Alba Pikeman, which, because it can give bleeding to our opponent every turn, that's another way to synergize with the Thirsty Dames in particular, and just statuses in general with Philippe as well. And then, because we have all the spying that Emir is going to be giving our opponents, we can use the Imperial Brigade, which has also been recently reworked, to damage all of our opponent's spying units and use this as a finisher. And then Morleham Hunter, another aristocrat in case you need it. More statuses in case you need it. We also have Fangs the Empire, which is mostly a filler, but of course, another status, another potential source of removal if you need more poison. That's just about everything. Anything else that we have is a special card in case we get locked or in case we run out of board space, because that is worth noting. With all of those scenarios, the scenario itself takes up room. And then, especially with Masquerade Ball, because both chapters play another unit, if we have 2 Masquerade Balls on the board when we trigger these, then we are going to have a ton of cards on the board very quickly and may very well run out of room to play our remaining units. So for that reason, with this deck in particular, it may make a lot of sense to play in round 1, and even if you don't intend to go for the 2-0 win, pushing at least a little bit in round 2, bleeding a little bit so that you don't have a long round 3 so that you can still benefit fully from Masquerade Ball and not clog yourself. But if it does come to that, you can still get some value from Golden Froth and also get some value from the Red Haze to damage your opponents. Which, if you find yourself in need of some damage to take out some of the ones that have the infusion from the Eternal Eclipse Initiate, that is potentially a way to help trigger that Death Wish as well. And that is about it for this deck. And so for this one, again, the overall idea is round 1, you go for Eternal Eclipse scenario, and round 2/3 is when you're breaking out Masquerade Ball, because you're getting the carryover from the Eternal Eclipse, and you're getting the tempo from Masquerade Ball. So, with all that being said, let's go see all of these decks in action. Alright, so going up against Skelga here, and this is actually a friend who is not a huge fan of when I play Nilfgaard, but we have Kolgrim in our starting hand. That's great. We have Glynnis as well. Jan can help us fine-tune our deck and the cards we draw into. Get our other Kolgrim. Okay, well, we don't really want to play him in round 1, in all likelihood. They'll start out with the Armored Drakkar. And, ooh, discard as well. Okay, now we love if they discard cards, because of course we have more cards than they do to start off with, since we loaded up our deck, and if they discard more, then that difference just becomes more dramatic, making Kolgrim more powerful. We'll start off with the Fire Scorpion to give us a damage-dealing engine. They'll go to Svalbard Priest, that'll be their engine next to the Drakkar, and they'll get another one. And turn that into a boosting chain. But I think what we'll do is we'll just hit one of those priests, and that'll get us into Amnesty range to steal that. And we'll swap you into Venendal Elite for a bit of a point slam, since that is better for us, and get the other one out from our deck as well. Actually, surprise, we only have 3 tactics in our hand, but obviously better than the Recruit was. And it's another Svalbard Priest. And card they would like to discard. But that would indicate that they are perhaps going to do more of that, and so we'd love to see it. Of course, their stratagem means they will as well. Let's get Glynnis on the board. She is one of our primary, really the primary point scoring engine that we're looking to build around in round 1, because she has that double assimilate. And she also has armor, so convenient to put her next to the Svalbard Priest. Herald for self-damage. And a Vilgefortz. Now that is a card that obviously we do not want to hit. Here's a little more discard. Now, they don't really know that we're trying to go with Kolgrim yet, so fortunately they keep on discarding. Let's maybe hit this Svalbard Priest, and then we can get it into removal range here. And they'll actually pass really early, and we love to see that, because that means we can just play a whole bunch of cards here, and obviously we'll have plenty of time to win the round. We'll use Jan just to make sure that we fine-tune the cards that we draw into. And although that will be enough for us to pass them, we will proceed to continue to play basically every card that we do not need to play in round 2 or round 3, because what this does is it lowers the amount of cards that we'll have at the start of round 2, so that if we do want to play Kolgrim, then we'll more quickly get to that Adrenaline 1, so it means we can basically have the majority of round 2 or round 3 with Kolgrim active, and we don't care if our opponent has more cards than us when this happens, because even after we pass, Kolgrim will still be active, still get those boosts, and it just means more time for Kolgrim to receive those boosts in that case. And in this situation here, we can draw into what is now the best card in our deck, and it is Oneiro, because we already used Jan, so we have our highest provision cards at the top, and so we can use Oneiro to get Kolgrim if necessary, but we can already get the perfect hand going into round 2 and take the round 1 win. Alright, so our hand is perfect because we drew into all of our high provision cost cards after playing Jan in round 1, and for our targets for Oneiro, I mean, maybe Defender, maybe Assire to get Glynnis back. That way Glynnis gets boosted when we play Stefan. Let's go Oneiro, and I'll be honest, we could already guarantee that we got our Defender when we played Kolgrim, because those are our only 2 9 provision cost cards in our deck, and so I'm not sure why I did this. Assire plus Glynnis would have been better. Golden Necker, though, we love to see that, because that means even more thinning. Now, obviously, it's a huge play and potentially a whole lot of tempo for them, so we'll have to see what they have here, but more discard. Again, we love it. They still technically don't know definitively that we're trying to use Kolgrim, so, I mean, Tutors also means they're gonna thin out even more. Location. Sigvald, that's a little bit frustrating because we do have a Stefan in hand, and so we'd like to use him to get a big burst of damage, and that's not really a card that we want to hit. Ciri with carryover, and a Quartermaster, which they'll use to hit Sigvald. Let's use the Stefan, and with it, we will get a ridiculous amount of damage, because we have so many tactics in our deck, and that's what dictates how many copies of these we get for the damage. And we'll hit Ciri. We won't destroy her, because she might be a good card for us to steal with our leader ability. Other Stefan, also get him. Also more damage. Again, can't really hit Sigvald. We'll get rid of the other guys. And now, let's use leader ability to steal Ciri and put her behind a defender, so not a lot they can do to shut that down. Another Golden Necker. Okay, keep on thinning. Works for us. In this case, Skjal for a point slam. Now, wish that was out on the previous turn, then that would have been an awesome target for all of our damage. Bartrim on Sigvald makes sense. And the lock won't really do much when we have our defenders out here. They'll even lock themselves, okay. Alright, so now we can break out the Kolgrims, because we won't have both of them active once Adrenaline 1 hits, so this one's a little preemptive, which means it is a little vulnerable. And Coral does discard, but she has the ability to damage through a defender, so that's a little scary. And naturally it hits Kolgrim, of course. Alright, so we paid a little bit for that, but we still have our other Kolgrim, and this time we are on Adrenaline 1 right now, so he will immediately get boosted up by 20. So, no, the Corals will not be a threat for Kolgrim here. The big question is, do they have something like Yrden to shut him down? Because they'll have to break through the defender before they can target him directly. And they will get some damage from the Callus here. Through hitting Sigvald, and yes, they can get rid of that defender that is protecting Kolgrim, so this is a little scary. But now with our second Oneiro, I mean, take your pick here. I guess we'll just go, I don't know, Experimental Remedy. And with it, I guess a Quartermaster. With Elite, we don't have any tactics in hand, of course, but alright, it's, you know, so the closest thing we could get to high point play. And they use the damage on Sigvald on themselves for point slam. Get their other Sigvald, and that would have been enough to catch us. But Kolgrim still gets boosted even after we pass. They realize they can't catch us after all, so they forfeit. Alright, so going up against Northern Realms here. And they'll go first. Okay, and we have an Imperial Practitioner So we want to create a bunch of copies of that, and we can do that to a certain extent with Operator and with Vigo. The Avallac'hs, let's actually get one of them back into our deck, and that'll help us get our scenarios, but what we really need here is a Vilgefortz Renegade in hand to swap this out into our opponent's graveyard. So let's dump you. And there he is. Perfect. Okay. Alright, they're going to start with Mutagenerator for some carryover, theoretically. So round one, really all we care about is, as with many Practitioner decks, maximize the Practitioner count, and in doing so, creating a bazillion copies of the Eternal Eclipse in our deck, and then that will give us, hopefully, all the points we need in round 2 and round 3, because we aren't necessarily playing for the round 1 win here. Well, let's get you out, and let's get the other one out. Technically we want to do Operator first. Yeah, oops. It's one more Practitioner we're going to miss out on in that case, because we need to do this while we still had a Practitioner in hand. I mean, theoretically we could Tactical Decision, but I'd like to save that for round 2/round 3 so we can draw into as many of our scenarios as possible. Okay, Doadrick, which is obviously the defender and would suggest they have some big intentions for this round, and actually we'd love to see that they have at least one card in their graveyard so we can do this Vilgefortz Renegade swap, although we don't want to do that just yet. So now let us... We could create Amphibious Assaults, but no, that's not what we're trying to do. So yeah, unfortunately I kind of bricked the Operator, but you know, it's kind of a luxury, don't necessarily need to have it, so we'll go for you into more Practitioners. And unfortunately, the order of operations here was not ideal. We'd like to get Idarran out here first so we can create even more Practitioners, but now we'll go Megascopes and spawn more in that way, and then we'll use Vilgefortz as our finisher for this round. Yeah, and the shorter this round is, the better, because they are trying to create a bunch of copies of bronze cards with full test, or at least that's what they will end up doing, to get as big a deck as possible, to get a bunch of carryover for what is likely an Erland finisher. So now let's set you up for more Practitioners here. And so Idarran will give us an extra copy of the Practitioners once we get the spawning happening. Okay, Drummer. There's some boosting. Okay, so yeah, it's a Sintrain Royal Guard deck. They're trying to create a bunch of copies of that. That makes sense. Okay, so now let's go with our other Megascope, make sure we get this set up. You know, we'll go range row just because this Idarran is going to spawn in some of that melee row anyway. Alright, Spellweaver, ooh, would have enough damage to disrupt our plans here, at least a little bit. Because this Practitioner is vulnerable. We'd like to wait one more turn before doing our swap, so that way we get 2 more Practitioners on the board, but this Spellweaver is going to cause some problems, so we kind of have one throwaway turn here while we're waiting for this to happen. So that probably means we're using Operator, which, as I said, we kind of messed it up a little bit. I mean, or we could alternatively, if they didn't have a defender, we could have gone Red Haze, which, if they didn't already have a card in their graveyard, would have also helped us to make sure we can still do this swap. But I think we will just do this here again as our throwaway. Okay, and sure, I mean, Prophet, yes, it is a cultist, so in that way we'd kind of like to save it, but we're locking whatever they play next, so there's something to be said for that. And so at least one of these Practitioners is probably about to get destroyed. Yeah, theirs goes 1. I assume they'll get more charges on that Spellweaver, and or just get another Spellweaver out altogether here, which means that this one and possibly this one may be toast, but fortunately you're getting locked from the Prophet, so that helped us a bit. Again, they're going to put up way more points than us in round 1. We're not too concerned about that. Okay, but now this is where we plan to do our big switch. So we don't want the Amphibious Assault. What we want to do is go... It's going to be double Vilgefortz, actually, which means the first swap we do not want to be the Eternal Eclipse. We want it to be probably Red Haze, just as a throwaway. And then the second Vilgefortz that we get from our deck, that's the one where we're going to swap out the Eternal Eclipse, and that's where we're going to press all the Imperial Practitioner order abilities and get all of them at the top of our deck. So do this. And again, we'll take the Amphibious Assault. We'll give you a bad card. And then this is the one that we care about. So we'll put Red Haze back into our hand, put the Eternal Eclipse into the bottom of their graveyard, and this is where all these are giving us our scenario. So that was the plan. So now we have a bunch of copies of that scenario. We will draw into them. We can get more of them with Avallac'h as well. And we can use our leader ability to help us get some. So that's the plan, is basically spam that like crazy for a ton of cultist power. And so we kind of hope that, I mean, they played a lot in round one, a lot of big stuff, but the full tests have set up some Royal Guard carryover of sorts. So they are still prepared to have a fairly big round 2/round 3 as well, but we'll see how we stack up here. So now we are going to pass, and fortunately, they've played one more card than us, so no major concerns about us not really pushing very hard in round 1 when it comes to putting up points. So now, everything that we draw into is going to be a scenario, and we can use Avallac'h to get 2 scenarios on the board in 1 turn. Otherwise, since these are not units, they're artifacts, we're not playing 2 of them per turn, because that's not how Double Down works. Let's get rid of the Amphibious Assault, because we don't care about you. Again, we're going to draw into more of these, and probably dump Red Haze as well. So I'm curious to see what they do here. Okay, they are at least playing a little bit. So we do need to get enough cultists to trigger the scenarios, and Master Ceremonies, fortunately, we have that in hand. So that is a way to at least get one. Actually, I mean, it's guaranteed to give us another gold cultist. Obviously, we have another Master Ceremonies in deck. I think our other 7 provision card is the Prophet that we've seen one of, and that's also a gold cultist. So yes, we should be able to trigger all of them. So let's do this. We also have leader ability we can use if needed. Again, this is only going to give us 1 because it's not a unit. It's an artifact. So pacing-wise, it's a little bit tough for that reason. But as soon as we break this out, it's going to be absurd. Okay, they're going to lock. I mean, we have so many more of these that we're going to see. Not super concerned about that. They have more locks, though. So they're going to wait to use this. So it's mostly a question of just order of operations. How many scenarios do we get out before we trigger both chapters? And do we want to do that via Avallac'h or directly from hand like this? How many more do we have in deck? We have 2, theoretically. So we might go Avallac'h here. I think let's do that. Let's go Avallac'h, get the scenarios out. Now, if you have already used all your scenarios, as you saw there, it is still possible to go with a Megascope. Obviously, it's significantly worse for the most part, but it's an option. So we might break out Master Ceremonies here on our next turn for the big tempo, because we are going to run out of board space, I think, if we spam even more scenarios. Obviously, some of these guys have been locked. We do technically, I believe, have a way to remove the lock here, but oh yeah, they're spamming a whole bunch of lock. But I actually kind of like that they get rid of Avallac'h, because now we have a little more board space to work with. Yeah, we have a Mahakam Ale or 2 if absolutely necessary, but right now we don't have a way to get it unless we get it through leader ability. So I think, yeah, unfortunately these are locked, which means I haven't gotten the chance to infuse any of them, which kind of stinks, because that's where a lot of the power is coming from. And the lock actually means that they won't benefit from the infusion on our side either, because it's going to stop the infusion. So, yeah. Might go one more here. Well, then again, no, I think we do it. We're not going to have time, though. It's going to take a lot of stuff. There's going to be a lot of cards we play as soon as we break out this Master of Ceremonies. So I want to make sure we have enough time to do that. They can still lock that as well. Urland, okay, they're breaking out their big finisher here. I assume that's going to be another Urland from their deck. It's probably their only 12 provision cost card. So that is worth a lot. They're going all in this round, basically, or at least have the potential of going all in here. So let's do it. First one triggers the first snare. Oh, look at this. Look at this. It actually actually is not a cultist here. And we do not have setup for operator. So that means we will not trigger the second chapter of the scenario, which is important because that's where we would get all of the actual cultists out onto the board. But the reason why this works so well is because, as you can see, we stack a bunch of copies of this this infused ability on whatever cultist we had on the board, and that's why we did not particularly like to see all these locks, because these guys are significantly weaker now. Okay, there's the huge deck boost. Absorbed by Erland. Spellweaver. I think what we need to do here is we need to go leader ability. And we need to get another gold cultist. And that we can do. So let's actually dump some Eternal Eclipse here. Dump you. Probably dump you as well. And let's play you. And with it, trigger all of these. And give us ridiculous cultist boosts on these guys. Yeah, he's at a 51 already. We would have liked to have had more units in our hands, so we could have turned them into cultists as well. But any cultists we have in our deck are, of course, still potential sources of power here. They have one card left. We can use Oneiro to nab whatever cultist we need, and that is, I think, almost certainly what we're going to go for here. And if you give us board space, we'll take it. Centurion Royal Guard. It is, I think, just barely going to be enough here for them to at least force us to play something else. So, I mean, let's make more cultists in our deck. Let's do that. Take your pick. I think we actually prefer to have bronze units be cultists if we can. So those scale a little more effectively. But now let's use Oneiro and use that into another Oneiro so we get both echoed copies in the next round. And then with this, basically just pick a cultist, and that will give us ginormous boosts on everyone else. So I should prefer to have someone that's not a pre-boosted, not someone who was initially a cultist, because those ones already have all of the infusions, and so they're way stronger. So I'd like to save those for round 3. But there you see, the boosts definitely made that sufficient to take the round 2 win here, even if Operator backfired on us a bit. We have a little bit of extra boost from this Temerian Drummer that will not suffice, so we'll win round 2 here. And we still have at least a few Eternal Eclipses, and we have the Oneiros we're about to draw into to get more of them. Or we'll just draw into them directly, and then we'll use the Oneiros to pick your cultist. So that's the plan, I think. And we'll see if they have a Yrden, because that would be pretty bad, but we have more cards than them. We have Last Say, actually, so we theoretically should still be fine. And they used their big finisher already with Erland. So, yeah, they may be able to spam more of those Centurion Royal Guards, but I'm not sure that's going to be enough in and of themselves, in a short round in particular. Because we are going to have ridiculous tempo, I do think. Okay, so let's go with another one of these, and we'll, I guess, infuse you. Okay, Spellweaver, sure. So now we're going to play one cultist with Oneiro and get another cultist out. Well, we might as well infuse you first for doing that. I could have gone for the Spellweaver, I suppose, but Oneiro into just one of the cultists that has all the infusions already, or actually might want to go with a gold cultist so that we trigger the snares that we have on the board. And if I were... Ooh, yes, let's go Isbel. Especially because this is the one that got the early infusion from Master Ceremonies. And I believe we're guaranteed to get the other Isbel out here, and she is also a cultist. So we do this, and she can also make this round last longer if we would like. We give you cultist. Yeah, we did not, but we can get another cultist out with the next Oneiro if necessary, or with you, or with this. So Isbel is actually a huge factor here because we can draw into another card. Also, look at how many infusions she has. Okay, it's reinforcements for Temerian Drummer. And Centurion Royal Guards, as we expected. They pass. They technically have caught us, but now we can still use Isbel. We can't even see her name. She has so many infusions. So we do this, and we will take... We'll take Idarran, they'll take Tourney Joust, I guess. Still not amazing, but at 8 provisions, it may give us another one of the cards that we're looking for, or we could Doadrick here. And, sure. So, yes, this might be approaching BM territory here, but on the other hand, I think we have to, right? In the name of science, this just has to be done. In the name of science, we must break out, I guess, a gold cultist. I would like for it to be a bronze cultist so that we can increase the value of all those infusions, but yeah, maybe that is still better. Otherwise, this would trigger the scenarios that we have on the board, but I think the boosts are probably still enough. Probably still enough here. So, you know, we'll live without triggering those last chapters of the scenarios as well, and take the win. Alright, so going up against Scoia'tael here. And we'll go first. Okay, so we have at least one of our Eternal Eclipse scenarios, which is the scenario that I prefer to play in round 1, because this gives us a little bit of carryover, whereas same cannot necessarily be said of Masquerade Ball. I think we dump that Red Haze, and we have the cultists to go along with this. Not really at the moment. Okay, let's dump Alba Pikeman then. I mean, I like the Thirsty Dames, don't get me wrong, but actually, it might be our only 5 provision cost units, if I'm not mistaken. And so having 3 of them in hand, we actually would be guaranteed to get them all out from our deck anyway. Okay, so we do have our Curse Scroll, which we can use to ensure that we get one particular card, if necessary, and maybe Snowdrop, who is a cultist and can also help us fine-tune our hand further, might not be a bad idea, because that could help us set up Eternal Eclipse. Either way, why don't we begin by turning as many people into cultists as possible with you. Because if we do that before we start... Alright, we're not going to have anyone to hit with this, thanks to the Empire, but if we do that initially, then once we trigger the Chapter 1 of the scenario, it's just going to be a little bit stronger. Okay, now don't care much about things in our graveyard, so not too concerned about Savior. Let's make more things into cultists. And what else? One of the snowdrops started off... I guess we're not going to see the things that have already been turned into cultists here, because we are transforming things that are not already cultists. The other thing is, can we get the second Eternal Eclipse out here? Normally, I would actually say that perhaps getting Avallac'h is the best way to go about doing things, is to get both scenarios from that. But again, because we don't have much in the way of gold cultists here... Ah, well, we should have done it. Yeah, we should have done it with you. That would have been the smart way to... And we still could. Okay, I guess that's the answer then. So we go Curse Scroll. We get Avallac'h. We put back you. And then we use Avallac'h to get both Eternal Eclipses out here. Avallac'hs are only 10 provision cost units. That means we are guaranteed to get you. Avallac'h number 2. And so now we need the gold cultist, but we can get the gold cultist with this Eternal Eclipse Deacon. Okay, more Giant Slayers. Now this is one guaranteed gold cultist, but we may or may not get another one out from our deck when we play you. And if not, then we can use our leader ability to see if we can get another gold cultist that way. So let's use you to at least... Well, first, let's infuse somebody. Let's go for you, I think. We'll double infuse you. Do we want to double infuse you? Or do we want to go for a Giant Slayer? Yeah, I think we'll take 2 Hawker Smugglers if we can. Then we use you. Turn one of the golds into a cultist. I think I prefer Tibor, to tell you the truth. Okay, now this is not really what we were looking for here, unfortunately. So we will probably need to go leader ability on our next turn, because yes, Tibor is enough to trigger one of them. Oh, well, yeah, no, we'll turn all of our cultists into infused cultists, yes. But we really want... I mean, I guess the second chapter is not as important. They'll get a little bit of carryover with the resilience here. We need to make sure that we at least trigger this first chapter. So let's first use this. Yes, we're in the lead, but if we don't take this turn, then we aren't getting the infusion, and that is the crucial component that we very much need. So now the gold cultist component doesn't matter much. So let's just add cultist status to Thirsty Dame. I think bronzes are usually better for that, because they increase the value of the boost once we do the infusion. Actually, this Tibor will get weakened, but that's actually fine. That's actually fine, because we don't need the points. They don't love that we're getting Emir out. Probably would have preferred the other Tibor. But I'm going to save the Cultist Thirsty Dame deliberately. Carry over. Get you out here. Obviously, this is enough points. So we did that because although we were still in the lead, we needed to make sure that we triggered at least the first chapter of our scenario. And so now that we've done that, we can pass. Even got a little bit of hand boosting from those Hawker smugglers that we stole. But now let's get rid of, I think, probably Red Haze and probably Mahakam Ale. These are the cultists that perhaps would have made things a lot easier in round 1. And Imperial Brigade may not look all that impressive, but when combined with Emir is quite nice. Now, we do have at least 2 throwaway cards here. Would we like to use them? Or dry pass here? I think, what if we infuse you with this Eclipse Initiate, and it gives us some flexibility as to whether we want to push further or leave it at just a... I hesitate to say you're a throwaway. You are very powerful now. Yes, we'll poison you because we can, and you'll take extra damage when you get that poison, which means this infusion, no, it's not going to be enough by itself, and you'll purify that anyway. But honestly, getting the caretakers out here, okay, that's a good infusion right there, or rather, good purification to get rid of our infusion. But I think this alone may be reason enough for us to not play in this round, and so maybe we'll just use the Van Molnham Hunter, lock one of them, make sure we'll infuse, you, I guess. And that'll be our last card that we play in this round, because these guys would have been a great way to shut down our infusions, and so we would rather just avoid them if we can, and if we'd like to, we can make sure that that happens. So we'll do this, and we'll lock one of you, and we'll get, okay, Deacon out here, and with that, can turn other people into cultists. Now these ones are just going to have the cultist tag. They are not going to have the infusion on them. I'm deliberately going with the bronze, because that way we can increase the power of the cultists that do have the infusion. But of course, this is, by most accounts, the weakest card in our hand, so, if there was one that we were going to play in this round, or one that we were going to mulligan in round 3, it probably would have been this, but it's still quite a solid finisher, so even then, I'm not too opposed to it. Then again, we'd probably like to use this ability and get one more cultist in our deck, but if we do that, then that means that we're going down to 6 cards, which we'd rather not do, because then they'll have card advantage in the next round. Likely, at least. Have card advantage in the next round. So, yeah, I think we'll just pass on one additional cultist. What is our cultist count in our hand? About half of them are. It's okay. Could be better, of course. We don't have Masquerade Ball, which is perhaps the most glaring omission. Okay, Gabort, well, they're going for more resilience. I suppose that can't be too much of a surprise, but actually, in this event in particular, you take up so much board space with all of your units, so you need to be kind of careful about that. So I'm not even sure that resilience is all that useful. Also not sure why they're using leader ability charges here. But, okay, they'll win round 2. Okay, so we do not have our scenario, however, Doadrick may help us get it. Let's probably dump you 2. And there's our other... actually, we were guaranteed to get Tibor with Emir, right? Those are only 13 provision cost cards that we had left. So that means Tibor is functionally not giving us any incremental value. So I guess we'll keep you, and we will dump you. And Alba Pikeman, does give us more statuses. So no Masquerade Ball unless we get one from Doadrick, or Leader ability might help us, and that could be a way to get rid of Fangs of the Empire if we don't really want that. Or Pikeman, neither of those are all that great. Yes, they can give us statuses, they can potentially give us more removal, but we can probably be a little more ambitious than that. Okay, Pavko. Give them some damage. But I think we do start with this. We could wait a turn. So there's a chance we'll get Snowdrop out. She's also 8 provisions. And if we do, then we'd like to use her ability immediately, but if we do, then we can't draw into 2 cards. We can only draw into 1 card, and that means we might want to wait to use this ability, and then she might get destroyed by the Pavkos. So I think, all in all, that means we may still want to wait a little bit. So what if we instead open with cultists? Because they do not require these synergies with Masquerade Ball. And we will lock one of the Povkos to slow down their damage. Now, these, of course, will give statuses, so they do have a potential synergy with Masquerade Ball. That's why they potentially work in the same deck. But that's, I think, a sacrifice that we're willing to make here, and we'll see if they can destroy you. No, it doesn't look like it, unless they get leader ability charge, which they might. And they do. Okay. Fair enough. Do we have any roll? I mean, actually, Doadrick is a Roll-Lock card, so it's probably not a bad thing to see them use at least one more of those charges here. I think they used the one in the previous round, because did it set up a death blow on this Giant Slayer? I don't know, it might have. So, at this point, I think it probably is Doadrick. Yeah. So if we can get, and it is Snowdrop, so yeah, that's why we deliberately waited a little bit. So, we'll use you. And we do get at least one Masquerade Ball. And Tibor, as we said, Tibor we don't want, because we're going to get him when we play Emir automatically. But we'll dump... I think we'll dump Fangs the Empire. So now you can draw a card every turn, which will power up Snowdrop over time. She is a cultist. I don't like that much movement, though. So Doadrick is certainly going to get shut down here when they move him, either from Malena or from leader ability. That was really the only row-locked card that we had, and we can still further fine-tune our hand with our leader ability, which we may do, but we might play Masquerade Ball first. I think we do. Then we use this, and with it, front us some more cards. And there's the other Masquerade Ball, so that's definitely something we were looking for, and I think we just dump you two and probably the Alba Pikeman, and then that is pretty much the ideal hand here. Oh, wait, hold on. Philippe at 8. Do we have other 8s? Yes, we do. We have Doadrick and Snowdrop. Okay, so we can actually potentially get more of them out there. Is that... Do we have enough? Yeah, we had one of each in our deck, so that is sufficient. It's just enough to get them all out here. Now, we are going to run out of board space in all likelihood, because Masquerade Ball does take up some room with both the artifact itself and with the units that we spawn in, so we are actually not that opposed to them dealing some damage to us. Now, I'm sure they're going to try to go after this Thirsty Dame or this Snowdrop, which is, of course, one of the more valuable cards, more valuable units that we have here. So, I would, on one hand, we'd like to get Masquerade Ball out here as quickly as possible, so that when we do play our next Aristocrat, we trigger both of them pretty much immediately and can start removing stuff. On the other hand, if we start playing Aristocrat, we can immediately get rid of something like shut down this Povko or that Malena. Probably Povko is the most concerned, or even 3 and 4. But I think we try to wait this one out. We know at some point we are going to get another Doadrick, so let's deliberately, if we can, play more things in our melee row. Okay, so yep, not so surprisingly, the Thirsty Dame goes down. They're probably going to try to get rid of this one as well. We do still have a Thirsty Dame in hand, and in fact, this one is stronger because it has the Cultist tag and has the infusion to get more power whenever we play a Cultist. So we care more about this one than we do about that. But I think we might want to prioritize getting Emir out so we get more spies, because their board is already quite full. And that is, we need the spying statuses to power up this Imperial Brigade. So we do this. Again, we're going to go melee row because we can. And we'll play this Thirsty Dame, I think. Not thrilled about that Mahakam Ale, but then you. Tibor, again, we'll probably try to be in this row if we can. I mean, they have some movement, so there's a decent chance that they have Gesras. If they do, then we'll try to lock him, because melee row stacking against him is not a great idea. What do we prefer? I think Povko, actually. And after that, maybe 3 and 4. Well, actually, that Doublethon to Sentry is going to give them a lot of additional points if they get more movement going. So this is what I mean. That takes up a ton of space, of course. So we need to be careful of that. Yeah, this double ton of sentries are certainly adding up. But at some point, they may just flat out run out of space on their ends and not be able to play anything. Whereas, I mean, I guess that's something to be said for having Mahakam Ale, if we do run out of room. Or if we don't have the chance to play Imperial Brigade, we'll live with that. I think we need to play Prophet pretty darn soon here, otherwise we're going to run into that Adrenaline 2, which we don't want. Then again, we are only going to be able to play a few more units here. We actually kind of like that Catwitcher to destroy some Fangs of the Empire for us, or this Fangs of the Empire, or that Morvran. All that would be fine with us. I guess we'll go Philippe or the Cultists. You are. So, I mean, in that sense, we would like to see you. I think we'll still do Philippe, though. He'll give us Snowdrop. And so now, let's use this to... I mean, we can lock Malena if we'd like. And I may. Or we can immediately lock the sentries. Let's actually do that. And we'll do this. See if we get anything better. On one hand, Albert Pikeman is potentially more powerful than Mahakam Ale. On the other hand, we aren't going to have room for it. So I think we still stick with what we have here, actually. Okay, they're going to lock our Philippe, unfortunately, and they're going to do some more locking here. I'm curious what they go for. Probably the Thirsty Dame? Yeah. Damage is already done to a certain extent with her, and that by damage I mean boosting. She's already gotten a lot of boosts. She was going to get bigger still, of course, but next turn we do need to go Prophet, otherwise we're going to get it locked. So, as much as I would like to use Philippe, I think we do this. That'll give us Master of Ceremonies, which is another Cultist, which means we're getting more Cultist boosts. So at this point, we'd like to see that Catwitcher destroy some of our weaker cards here, because we are running out of room. We may have room for Philippe, and with Philippe, we're going to see Doadrick come out from our deck as well. At the moment, we wouldn't have room for him. Who are they locking now? Oh, well, they're getting locked from Prophet. Malena is not a huge factor, because, I mean, they can move one card if they want to, but that's pretty much it. Okay, so I think it is still... I mean, either it's... I mean, it could be Mahakam Ale on Philippe. And actually, I think it should be, probably. And then, you know, we give them one more turn to maybe destroy a card, so we have space for this Philippe plus the Doadrick that we'll get out. So this also does not give you Zeal. So it takes a turn before we can use this again. Then, as I said, we'll have this be our last card, and so if we don't get the chance to play Imperial Brigade, we'll live with it. They have a decent number of spies, not a ton. I would love you to destroy this. Is this Gezros? It is. Okay. So they will both immediately be the targets of our lock. They can still do boosting and do damaging, even when their rows are full. So, fortunately, we have enough room here. So we can go Philippe. And we can go with Doadrick. He gets Zeal because we have an agent. Let's immediately lock Gezros. Then we use Doadrick to get a little more card draw. Either way, we're just not going to have room for it. So, I mean, take your pick. You also have the Cultist tag, though, so I guess we'll keep you. So we are out of space and likely can't do anything else. They are out of space as well. We've locked their most important engines. Can they still get any value? They will still get, what, a Catwitcher damaging? But that's about it. We can still get the locks here. So now, yeah, with 2, we can lock you. Or we could destroy this Povgoat. Let's not give them board space, though. Yeah, let's lock this. Then let's draw a card, and that'll at least give us a little boost on Snowdrop. And actually, we can get a little bit more value out of this. And unlock you in the process. You'll get one more boost from the status from Tibor. So can they do anything when their board is completely jammed? And they won't even play that last card, so clearly the answer is no, and we'll take the win. So there's a look at 3 more Nilfgaard decks for the new Double Down seasonal event. If you liked the video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and leave a comment down below to let me know which other cards, archetypes, and factions you'd like us to experiment with next. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.